to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Ways to improve your IELTS listening. Hi there, my name is Ben Worthington, and in this tutorial, Daphne and I will guide you through the IELTS listening test, and we'll give you a quick overview, and then we'll tell you about how to improve your score. So how are you doing today, Daphne?
Oh, hi, Ben. Hi, everyone. I'm fine, thanks. Really fine. Enjoying some really lovely weather at the moment.
Yeah, I know. It's beautiful in England. I was talking to my dad last night, and he says it's just absolutely blissful.
It's unusual because, as you all know, it rains in England a lot. But Ben and I were just saying that since lockdown, the weather's just been fantastic. So that has been a bonus.
Yeah, I remember I used to tell my friends in Spain that when it's sunny in England, what usually happens, I don't know about the south of England, probably the same, but up north, people would take off their shirts and then go to the beer gardens and proclaim England's the best country in the world and fill themselves up with pints and then have a fight. And then that's... I can't imagine. Does that happen down south as well?
Well, Ben, goodness me, obviously not in my social life. I think it does happen. Yeah, people get very excited when it's hot. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Not in my social life either, by the way, just a disclaimer. But I remember seeing this a lot when I was a student in England. And also, just growing up, I'd always just avoid that. That kind of lifestyle. All right, so let's get into it. IELTS listening. Right then, with the IELTS, how about we do a section each? Does that sound all right,
good
Daphne?
idea. Yeah, good idea.
Okay, super. So I'll go over first about how the test, sort of a very brief overview of the format, and then Daphne will go into the different sections, and we're just going to go through the whole tutorial like this, and it'll be quite straightforward. Also, if you have a pen handy, strongly recommend writing down, making notes. This will make it easier for you to recall, and easier for you to remember, and just easier as well just to put into practice. So,
well, actually, Ben, so I'm going to jump in there because actually making notes is a key skill for the IELTS listening. So you can listen to this like it was a mock test if you want, and take notes as you go along.
Absolutely. I'd love to make a test out of this. Like, which country is the best in the world when it's sunny? Which country has citizens which think it's the best in the world when it's sunny? Anyway, let's jump into it. So, I'll give you a quick overview. Now, just in my experience, what I find with the listening is that students who score high in the receptive skills, such as listening and reading, usually find it quite easy with some proper guidance to improve their score in the productive skills, such as speaking and writing, because they've got that foundation there as well. Would you agree with that, Daphne?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I think the listening it's interesting. I think listening is sometimes underestimated, Ben. So I think that's why we chose to do this today. But yes, generally, if you're confident on your listening and your writing and your reading, then your vocabulary will be good. You'll be used to the grammatical phrases at quite a high level, and you'll be able to translate that more easily into your writing and your speaking.
Exactly, yeah. And grammatical knowledge is key, and we'll mention that later on in this tutorial. First, let's jump into it. So I'll give you a very, very brief overview. So the test lasts 30 minutes. You got 40 questions. There are 4 sections, and each section is quite different, and there's a variety of different question types. Okay. Now, this is important because you do not want to waste time getting familiar with the format. Also, you can use this familiarity to help you with your confidence issues, so you know what to expect and you can know the pattern. And just as a side note, we have Formula One drivers, and they're the best drivers in the world, but they will still review the circuit they're going to race at before starting the race. So even though your listening skills might be excellent, it is undoubtedly necessary. It's absolutely essential, actually, just to at least do a few practice tests before going in and presenting for the actual real test.
I completely agree with that, Ben. And also, you don't want to panic. If you're familiar with the test and the format and how it works, you'll go in there nice and calm and you'll be fine. The worst thing is to be like not ready for a type of question which you weren't expecting or you haven't practiced, because that will you'll waste time because you'll be panicking.
Exactly. Okay, Daphne, do you want to go into each section about what we can expect in each of those?
Yes, so this is what I mean about knowing the sections, knowing what to expect. So there's two things to keep in mind here. The first thing is the general purpose of each section and how many people speak. So what I mean by that purpose is not just the aim of the communication. So in the section 1, it's usually an everyday situation. So it's two people speaking. It might be making an appointment for a doctor or a survey question. It's kind of functional language. But so that's testing a different kind of skill. So each section is testing a different kind of skill. So section 1, let's go through this. Section 1, 10 questions. So it's your ability to understand everyday English, making inquiries, asking for something, spelling your name, this sort of thing. The sections start easy, they get more difficult. But this is really to tune you in. So that has 2 speakers. Section 2, another 10 questions, work or study related and providing information. And here, usually just 1 speaker, but I've been listening to a few of them recently, and sometimes there are 2, so don't worry about that. But you must listen for specific details. Section 3, another 10 questions, is a small group discussion about study, usually. So it's academic, usually in purpose, as we're saying. So a small group discussion, at least 2, maybe more speakers. And section 4 is a monologue. So a monologue is 1 person, and that is usually an academic lecture. That's the longest concentrated section, and always 1 speaker. So the reason why it's important to know the sections is that you can then work out what you're good at. If you're happy listening to 1 person really concentrated, like part 4, the lecture, that's fine, great. If you find it difficult hearing 3 voices or 2 voices at a time, then you can focus on working on that skill.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I moved to Spain from England, and I would be listening in a group to a bunch of Spaniards talking, and I couldn't do it in a group. If it was one-on-one and they were looking at me and I could do it, but when there was a group, I was completely lost. And by the time I had formulated or understood what they were talking about, then formulated a question or a comment, the conversation had moved on, and it was a real sense of hopelessness. But with the listening, it is the hardest feeling in the whole world, isn't it? Totally.
The other thing with listening, of course, is that you don't have what we call the paralinguistic skills, not skills, triggers or movements or whatever it is. So you can't see somebody waving their arms around, or you can't see someone looking angry. You've just got to listen very actively. Everything is in the voice.
Absolutely. And this is why, practicing on the phone or even doing your English classes without seeing the tutor could be a way to boost these kinds of skills. So you're just intensely focused on what you hear. And
that's a good idea.
It just really sort of like, it's like putting more weights on your lifts at the gym. Just going from 15 kilos up to 20 kilos if you close your eyes when you're speaking. Obviously you don't want to do this in public because you look a bit weird. Just stand in a group with your friends and close your eyes. No,
Actually,
not good.
I'm just going to go off topic for a tiny bit, but I heard something really, really clever question. Why, in the car when you're lost, this is me, I often get lost. In the car when you're lost, why do you turn the radio down? And it's really interesting, and everyone does it automatically. You turn the radio down because you need to focus more. And it's this thing about not being able to concentrate on too many things at once. So it's a bit like you're intently trying to find where you're going. And it's the same with the listening. You've got to really intensely focus while you're doing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like we said before, with all the tests, with the speaking, the reading, the listening, the writing, you do not want to go in there cold. You want to go in there having just finished an English class, or having just finished having a conversation, warming up. And it's the same for the listening. Of course you don't want to burn out your energy, but you do want to go in there quite warm and already sort of like having switched into English. So you don't have to do that switch during the test. Okay, moving on to the next one. So that's a nice link to applying to the next point of applying listening strategies. We're going to go into more detail about this, but very briefly, it's valuable to know that it gets progressively more difficult throughout the test. So section 1 you might find is a breeze. Section 4 will get progressively more difficult, and it's good to know this. Also, as we just mentioned, obviously listening to 3 people is going to be more challenging than listening to 1. And also in the topic as well, if you're listening to a university lecture or monologue, as we said earlier, it's going to be easier than a kind of transactional conversation such as a hotel booking. So just bear these points in mind before you actually go into the test, and just go in there, as we said, warm and knowing what to expect, knowing what's ahead of you. All right, and then Daphne is going to mention now the next point about using time to read the questions.
My favorite thing is always read the question. And there's 2 things here that are really, really important. So you get time. It's roughly, I don't know if it's 30 seconds or a minute, Ben, but you get time at the beginning before each section to look at the questions. And often they break it down. So it might be you have 5 questions, and then you look at those, and then there's a pause, and it says, and now look at questions 6 to 10 or something. And look at the question. Don't just look around the room. Look at the question. It is really valuable time, and for 2 reasons. The first thing is it tells you what the next section's about. So this is your summary, in a way, if you like. This is your biggest clue as to what it's going to be about. So if it's talking about cooking classes or something, and a quick look at the questions tells you small classes or discount or special skills or something, you know what's coming. You're going to hear cooking vocabulary or class vocabulary or some money vocabulary. So you're instantly activating your vocab, activating your knowledge, you're predicting. And you've worked on prediction since probably the first English class you had. So you know how to do this. That's really important. Look at the question. The second thing is look at the rubric. So look at the actual type of question. Is it a table completion? Is it sentence completion? Is it short answer? There's lots of different types in the IELTS listening, and that's why it's important to practice. So if it says, for example, section 1, and this is very common in section 1, you have to fill in a table with 1 word and or a number. This doesn't mean 2 words or 3 numbers. It really, literally 1 word or a number. And to make sure you can do this, make sure you know what kind of word is going to be in each space. Now, this is the grammar that Ben was talking about. So, for example, if the gap is how to cook with seasonal products, so it's going to be a verb, how to use and cook with, for example. If the grammar, on the other hand, if it's a name of something, so it's the center, you know it's going to be the I don't know, Tefont center or the something, but it's going to be the name. So it's very important. Look for clues. Do you need a verb? Do you need a noun? Do you need an adjective? Is it spelling, like somebody's surname?
Absolutely.
That kind of grammatical knowledge and topic knowledge is really important, and that's really going to help you even before you've heard the passage.
Yeah, excellent points there. The grammatical knowledge especially, because I think as you progress with your English ability, you're going to get more confident and you're going to spot these patterns, these formulas, and it just opens up the language even more, and it just becomes progressively more easy. It may not seem like this, but it's like an S curve when you're learning a language, in my personal experience, and well, a lot of people's experience. But you start a long time and you struggle, and then you suddenly increase dramatically, and then to get any further, it takes a lot of effort. And you don't get as big a return. But when you're in that S, that's when you're learning these formulas, and they are essential. They are they're really valuable. And also, it's when you're going to be boosting, when you have a broad range of vocabulary, which will help you with this topic knowledge. And just to go off on a point here, topic knowledge is important. It's going to help you in both the writing, the speaking. It's going to help you in every section practically. And especially as a learner of the language, it's very useful, and you will come across as a much more fluent, a much more knowledgeable, a much more interesting speaker if you can use certain topic-specific vocabulary. I remember in Spain when I used to name the parts of a bike, and I knew the vocabulary better than my Spanish friends just because they'd never bothered to find out the exact term. And yeah, it's good feeling better.
That is really impressive. But it's funny. It's funny the language you pick up when you're learning, and it might be you listen to something on the radio, or you're watching a TV series or something, and you're picking up this vocabulary. And sometimes because it's so strange, it just sticks with you.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I like the little stories as well behind each vocabulary term. If you've got the luxury of having those stories, then it makes it so much easier.
But quickly, I'm going to go back on the grammar for a minute, because this is something that I know my students find really hard. When you say, look at that sentence, is the gap going to be a verb or an adverb or an adjective? Look at the grammar. And people find that very hard, because often you've picked up a language and you haven't necessarily learned the names of the grammar terms. And it feels sometimes really hard for people. Instinctively they know it's a verb, but they wouldn't necessarily know that they need to call it a present perfect participle or what the technical name is. But really take the time when you're preparing to know the technical names for these things, because it will actually make your life easier.
Yes, and just one final point there. Go with your gut as well. Yeah. Quite often, the first word that comes into your mind from how to something, how to cook, how to season, how to taste, how to boil, whatever. The first word that comes into mind is got a high chance of being the right one. So go with that gut feeling. Trust your
good
gut.
Advice. Yeah, good advice.
Okay, moving on to the next one. The next point: speed and patience. So remember, at the beginning, you're probably going to have a few seconds just to get used to the accent. Okay, this isn't always the case, but usually there's not a question off the bat, so to speak, from the very, very beginning. The second point is that you need to keep a balance between working on the question and listening at the same time. So this is you just got to get used to engaging both skill sets. You've got to be simultaneously listening and reading.
It's hard, yeah.
It's tough. And also, if you do find that you have missed a question, don't worry about it. The best thing is just to keep moving forward. Okay? Keep just focusing on your question paper. Don't get in a panic. Just like, okay, that one's gone. Let's just keep following this script. Let's keep following these questions in front of me, and we will be okay.
I think that's a very good point, Ben. You can get panicked because you think, "Oh, hang on a minute, I've missed that," because then you've listened, you've heard the answer for the next one. But keep moving forward.
Exactly. Yeah. Best way. Okay. So the next section, we're going to talk about clues and questions.
Yes. Okay. So we've already said that we've got this special time before each section to look at the questions, make decisions as to, okay, what's the topic going to be? What's the grammar that I'm going to be needing? The sort of thing. But more than that, you need to know the kind of question types that might happen. So I mentioned some, but there are three basic question types. The first one is a fill-in or a completion. That might be a table. That might be details about your personal details, where you live. Watch out for, sometimes they ask you to talk about your postcode. Now, if you're not familiar with English postcodes, it is quite important. So we have two letters. So my postcode is BA12, and then another number, so 3, and then QM, 2 more letters. And so it's important to know how to write that. And the letters are all capitals. That's just an aside. It's not my real postcode, everyone. So you've got the fill-in or a completion. You've got multiple choice, and then you've got matching. So these types then have variations, but it's important to know what you're good at and equally what you're not so good at. So you can practice the ones you're not so good at and then turn them into a strength. Exactly. So work on the weaknesses and turn it into a strength.
Yeah, good point. I'll just interrupt before we move on. That this is the topic knowledge we were talking about. When we were talking about postcodes, if you know that the postcodes in England, start with 2 letters, then you can tune in and you can be expecting these letters. My postcode from when I was a kid, the first postcode I learned was HD7 2JP. That's for up north in Huddersfield. But I can still remember it to this day. And I remember when we changed, and my mum, she gave us the new postcode, but it was wrong. And I was giving out the wrong postcode for 2 years. And the problem was, I think my mum gave us HD72EB, but it should have been 2ED, Yeah. And so it's those small differences between a B and a D that sound very similar. And this is from my mum. Either I misheard it or she mistold me, but this is someone's accent who I'm probably pretty familiar with, you would expect, but there's still these mistakes. So just tune in when you get these. And if you can remember that structure of HD, letter, number, 2JP, number, letter.
Exactly. It is a strange structure, but it is worth being familiar with it. And Ben, actually, that leads really nicely onto the next bit. The difficulties that you may have with the fill-in and the completion is hearing that spelling or hearing that postcode. And some, in terms of spelling, obviously linked to hearing, some of the sounds in English are very difficult and sound the same, especially if someone's speaking in a hurry. But make sure you can distinguish your sounds. So this is really listening for pronunciation. This is really intense listening. The vowel sounds, so A, E, I, O, U, and some consonant sounds that get confused. So G and J. G and J, B and V. In some languages, those can be different. For me, in French, G and J are really hard because they're the other way around. And I know for Spanish speakers, B and V are difficult, Ben, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. And also the I and the E. I think it's something similar to what happens in France, or in French, where they switch round. So the E.
And in German as well. that happens. It's so confusing.
Yeah, exactly. I could see my friends, if I spell something, I always, especially with my Spanish friends, I always have to say E for elephant, Yeah. And then, it just clarifies it. So be aware of your weaknesses, but also the common challenges that your native language might face with English. So if you know that your language has similarities of false friends or whatever, be aware of these because they're definitely going to help you.
I completely agree with that. I mean, like E for elephant is very good. And one of my students had a problem with I. So like I as a person,
Hmm.
always wrote down a different letter. So every time it was I used to point at her, I, or point at me, I. But that you need a little thing in your head that's a trigger to
Exactly.
remember it and work on that now because you don't want to be in the exam thinking, oh gosh, I can't quite remember which one it is. If
Exactly. Yeah.
the spelling is, if you get the spelling wrong, the answer is wrong. There is no mercy on spelling.
Yeah, this is true. Can we just go back to the remembering the pronunciation? I just got a funny little anecdote. But when I was in Spain and I used to have to spell things out on the phone,
Oh,
there was one letter that always got me mixed up, and it was the letter U. And so I would be sort of like, doing the E for elephant, but I'd be doing it in Spanish, or P for Portugal, and so on and so forth. And then at the time, there's this big scandal with this politician who'd just been had just been thrown into jail, for, I think, or some massive scandal. But I always used to say, and his name was Ugandarin, I think it's this Basque guy. So I always used to say, U for Ugandarin, And I think that made them smile, and they'd be like, okay, thanks for that. Sorry, let's
Ben,
move on. Go ahead,
Ben
sorry.
forgot the lesson about never talk about politics. That's
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, without going into too much detail, but you can classify the sounds into groups. That's really what we're saying. So
Yeah.
some sounds, some letters sound the same or have the same sort of A, H, J, K. So they have that A sound. It's difficult to do this speaking, Ben, because I want to write down phonemic scripts, but work out for you, like Ben said, which sounds are difficult for you. That's probably the best advice here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just one last thing. Well, you did mention spelling, and then we got distracted. But just going back to spelling. There's a few different ways you can work on this. I'll very briefly say, and one thing that I did was just turned off the autocorrect. So I would see that a spelling had an error, and then I would just go back and try and write the correct version rather than right-clicking and looking for the correct version. I try and work it out first, and this way, just by spending that little bit of extra effort, I soon found that my spelling vastly improved. And also, what we say to students who send us in their essays, we say, look, you are responsible for doing a spell check on your essay. First, if you do this, not only are you going to be paying more attention to your writing, but also a machine can do this. So us as evaluators, as giving you feedback as IELTS professionals, this way it frees up time for us, so we can give you some real powerful advice so you can improve faster. So yeah, if you're sending in your essays, just spell check them first, make a note of all those errors, send us in the corrected version. Don't just stop working on your spelling, then keep on working, but this will free up time for us. All right. So moving on to the next one.
Multiple choice.
Yeah.
So we've looked at fill-in and completion, and we've said watch out for spelling. Multiple choice, very familiar. You've had multiple choice forever. You get it in reading as well. It's a very good way of testing your comprehension. In the IELTS listening, there's 3 choices, so A, B, C, rather than 4, which you might have in the reading. But here's where you have to be really on your really alert. Look out for the small differences and listen very carefully. It may be a difference of verb meaning. So may do something, so question, compared to wants to do something, compared to will do something, for example. So very subtle differences. And also be alert, because you might think you've got the answer and you quickly write down A, and then suddenly at the end, they've changed their mind. So, for example, here's a little extract. 2 people talking about some work they have to hand in. So we'll send the draft version to our tutor then. Yes, all right, but shouldn't we read them over ourselves again first? I don't know. Let's ask Emily what she thinks. So you might have ticked send the draft version, but actually by the end, they're not going to send it in. They're going to get advice first.
Absolutely.
So the information may change. Just be aware of that.
Yeah, and I spoke with a test writer, who writes them for Pearson, for IELTS and all that. And she said that not all the time, but a lot of the time, they will make it explicit just to kind of trick to separate the band 6s and the band 7s. They might make it explicit. So in this case, we will send the draft version to our tutor then. Yes, all right, that's 2 affirmations. There's 2 affirmations that this is the right one. And then for a lot of students, for especially the band 6s, they'll be like, I have my answer. But if you were aiming for a band 7, you've got to keep focused and just wait for that small contradiction of, in this case, it's, I don't know. Let's ask Emily what she thinks. You see, so there's that small contradiction. So do not be followed. If you feel the conversation is going down a path and it's like, this is obvious, it's going to be this, you should pay extra attention and wait for that small mini contradiction.
Look out for tricks. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Okay, so the third type of question is like a matching. So you can ask you to match a series of answers, so identified by a letter, to a set of questions. Now, this sounds quite complicated, and this can be where people trip up. It's not as difficult as you think, but again, do some practice on that first if it's something that you're not familiar with. And often the key information is repeated. So sometimes you do get a chance if you think, it could be that, but I'm not sure. You may hear it again. So I'm sorry, you won't hear the whole listening again, but they may come back to that information. So you might get a chance to just confirm your first guess or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Moving on to preparation and practice. Now, there are lots of listening tests out there. Now, I strongly recommend following the official ones from IELTS.org or investing in the Cambridge IELTS exam books, 1 through to 12. Somebody told me about some torrents available with all of them in there. I don't know if that's true, but you definitely want to get the official material. And
Ben, I was listening to an IDP one yesterday, actually, which was very good as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah, that was very, very clear. I don't know where the booklet comes from. I didn't research that, but I'm sure you can get hold of it. But it was literally, turn to page 2. Look at these questions. It gave you exactly like an examiner. It had a range of different accents, which is something we haven't talked about yet, but it's quite important. It was really, so that's an official source as well, the IDP.
Yeah, definitely. And also, don't be sort of like afraid of, if you've got your test in a week, then you want to be just doing IELTS exam papers. If you've got your test in about 3 months' time, then you can be a little bit more relaxed and maybe do some Cambridge exams. You could do, I'm just saying, like, if you feel that you've only got a limited amount of IELTS tests to get through, then don't be afraid of improving your listening through other English exam tests, such as maybe the TOEFL, the Cambridge, or whatever. I wouldn't recommend doing this, obviously, with it 10 days before your exam, but if you've got a lot of time and you really are committed, then you're probably going to get bored and probably going to use up all the official IELTS tests you can find. In that case, then start looking around and doing other tests as well. Also, as we mentioned, it's up to you just to find out your weak points, work on those specific points. For example, if matching is your weak point, work on that specifically, especially if you've only got 10 days left of your prep. 2 final things. Transcribing is a very, 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 cost-effective way of learning. You're going to not only improve your vocabulary, you're going to improve your pronunciation, because the first time you hear that word, if it's a new word, you're going to hear it pronounced correctly. This is why we offer transcripts with these podcasts, because it gives you the chance to read along, and if you're really committed, you could transcribe it yourself and then compare to what we've transcribed, our human transcriber transcribed for us. Also, TED Talks are fantastic. They come with transcriptions. They also come with transcriptions in in other languages, so you could listen to a talk in English and read it in German, for example.
Such a good resource. Yeah, really, really good resource. And making notes. I mean, I think the especially with the part 4, which is a long one, get used to listening to something longer. Really keep pushing yourself, and then write a little summary afterwards, because a lot of that's sort of what the summaries are. If you get a summary completion where you're filling in the gaps, you're looking for synonyms. This is what you're looking for, and you're looking for vocabulary. Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah. Good point there. Good point. And other sources of decent material, and I would strongly recommend you go for official, sort of like authentic native English speaker material, because not only are you going to encounter a wide variety of accents, but it's also going to be at like native English speaker speed, which is going to be very helpful. And plus, resources such as The Guardian, BBC, The Independent, The Economist, they're going to be speaking, as we said, at a speed that's going to be similar to the test. They're going to be using, you're probably going to hear accents from Ireland, the UK, Australia, US, Canada, and this will help you build your ability to tune in and accustom to new accents, which is very, very useful. And just one last thing, find information that you find useful, for example, or entertaining. You do not want to listen to The Economist if you find economic issues boring, because you'll just switch off and you'll be in that situation where your mind is thinking about lunch, but somehow you can hear some guy talking about macroeconomics, Personally, I used to, sometimes I still do, I'll watch a football match in Spanish rather than in English. And I do this. I do this for 2 reasons. One, I don't want to lose my Spanish. And second, it's so much more emotional watching it in Spanish. It gets so much more involved. And yeah.
It's a good point, that actually. I mean, it doesn't have to be painful, but what you're doing is listening, and what you're doing is building up your power to concentrate. For me, the listening exam is difficult because my mind disappears onto something else, and I'm thinking about lunch. I'm thinking about going for a bike ride later, and I suddenly think, oh my God, I missed 2 questions. It's about concentrating. So that's practice listening to something you like.
Exactly. And also, just one last clarification before we finish. Try to distinguish, before you start the activity, between, okay, am I just going to kick back and relax, or am I going to be actually hunched over a desk with a pen in my hand, actively listening and taking notes, and just get it clear from the beginning, because then you won't be beating yourself up, like when I'm watching football, I'm not taking any notes, unless there's something amusing or some vocabulary term, but usually I'm just kicking back and relaxing. But if I'm studying, then I'm absolutely taking notes all the time. Okay, so that's everything. If you've got any questions, then you can send us an email. Remember, you can download the official IELTS podcast apps, which come with the transcript that we mentioned, come with the transcript for each episode. And if you want to pass your exam pretty soon, then you probably want to invest in the Jump to Band 7 or It's Free IELTS course we have. And also, we've got the speaking feedback service, and we've got the writing feedback service where we can evaluate your work and help you improve faster. How's it going with the speaking?
That's great, actually. Really, really good. So many people who send in their essays are just thinking, actually, do you know what? I think I might just get my speaking checked out. So we're having lots of really interesting conversations with people about just the structure of the speaking part 2. And then for people who want to carry on and get a bit more work done, we'll focus with them on pronunciation or connected speech, some of the issues that they might find hard. And of course, working on your speaking directly links into how you listen as well. So it's all really relevant.
Absolutely. Great point there about the connected speech. Once you understand connected speech, I think it'll make the listening much, much easier. We could go talk about that in another episode, but that's really that's really useful. I've talked about it before in the past, so I won't go into it now. But it's, if you can learn how to do it, and also if you can start recognizing it, it makes the whole listening experience much, much easier.
Exactly.
Okay, that's everything from me. So good luck in your exam and take care.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks for listening to IELTSpodcast.com.